Hello and welcome into another edition of Huber and Friends. I'm Jeremy Huber, and we're lucky enough to
I'm the
be
friend.
joined. you jumped your intro, Mark. That's Mark Fratto. He's a golden voice that you hear all over, especially in the DC area. If you go to Wizards games, you go to Commanders games, you're going to hear him also. If you watch boxing events all over the place, he's all over those. Mark, thank you so much for joining Huber and Friends.
Thanks for having me. I'm much better at doing intros probably than getting introed. So that's why I blew my cue, blew right past that stop sign. I saw you. You're stop. I was going for home.
Hey, yeah, your baseball background, I'm sure that's going to influence you there too. Mark, it's so good to get you on because you're another guy that's got an interesting story as I kind of go back through the Rolodex and think of all the folks that I know and, maybe not need to know a little more about them. You're one of my friends that have kind of come on a little bit later on. I've had some folks on this who I've known since the high school days. We met basically doing Georgetown football. You, the guy who was putting it all together, me, the guy, your voice. Again, I guess as opposed to saying, how do you remember that we met? What did you think when you first met me?
When I first met you, well, it's kind of interesting the way that you tell that because I'm not sure if we're old friends because we've been friends for a few years or if we're old friends because we met when we were old. But I think it's probably more a little bit more than B than A. But yeah, when actually I think the first event that we might have worked together was the Paradise Jam in the DC Convention Center during COVID. I think so that's maybe the first time that we actually met. 2020 masks on. We were definitely not in Paradise. We were in
Mm-hmm.
DC Northwest at the convention center with a basketball court down and the fluorescent lights overhead. I was doing PA, and I think you were the play-by-play person with Chris Nocky, the analyst on that on those games. I was just happy during COVID that we were working an event, which is fantastic. So, um, but I remembered how sharp you were that day. I remembered how how ready to go you were, and I said I'm going to keep this guy in mind if we ever have a chance to work together again. I think that would be great. And as it turned out, I think that next fall we started doing Georgetown football. They had just finished the renovation of the stadium. They had finished all the fiber optics that kind of connect the rooftop camera positions to the field side camera positions back to a central control room and all the internet mainframe and all that for trying to get a HD over IP signal out. So they brought us on because we were used to dealing with that sort of thing. And yeah, a couple of years later, I think this is it's going to be maybe our fourth or fifth season of Georgetown football. You've been part of that, obviously, every step that we've been around for that. And then, we've also worked together on some Howard football, some high school games, and some other events. And we always look forward to seeing you when you're on the call sheet. We're always excited.
Well, appreciate that. And same back to you. Always fun working with your crew. Always professional. We're going to get into that part of your background, but want to take it way back for you. You're a kid who grew up, I believe, in Poughkeepsie, New York. What was it like in your early days, and where did your love of sports come from?
Well, I was a Catholic school kid, and Poughkeepsie's a suburb about 90 minutes north of New York City. And I got used to sports and being around sports from playing. I was a little kid baseball player and basketball player, and I learned a lot of really, hopefully, great qualities, and hopefully qualities that have stuck with me, today into no longer being a player of sports at any high level at all, if there ever was. That's a matter of question as well. But hopefully, I brought some of those qualities that I learned as a little kid, baseball and basketball player, into being a father and being a husband and maybe being a business owner and being a coworker. Um, I learned how to be a great teammate. I was occasionally named the captain of my teams, or I was occasionally named an all-star, and it was rarely because I was the best player or even a very good player. I think I was a hustler, a hard worker, and I think it was a good teammate. And I learned those qualities young. I've hopefully, like I said, carried them through to kind of my different roles, the different hats that I wear. All the way today as a 47-year-old, very, very slow, very, very bad player of any sport that I attempt these days, but hopefully a better dad and a better husband and a reasonably good announcer and somewhat, somewhat semi moderately modestly successful entrepreneur. So try to do all those things. But yeah, we had a lot of sports in our community there. Little League and CYO and and all those things. And then the highest level playing that I ever played was varsity baseball, and I wanted to try out for the basketball team when I was in high school as well. And my baseball team, I was on the cross country team. I was the captain. I was on the baseball team. And I was the captain. And I said, I think I'd like to try out and see if I can play some hoops as like a
Mm-hmm.
junior or senior. And one of my baseball teammates, one of my best friends, still turned to me and he goes, "Please don't try out. You're just going to get cut. But maybe you could be our announcer and introduce us like Michael Jordan gets introduced at the old Chicago Stadium at the time." And I thought about it and I said, that could be cool. And then I went to a Division III college in upstate New York, State University of New York at Geneseo. And second day of school, I walked with my roommate down to the athletics department offices, and I said, "Who's the basketball announcer? And could that be me?" And that's kind of where things took off. A couple of years of high school, then some D3, and then on to Maryland and West Point as my first taste of a Division III. But believe it or not, if you dial it way back, we used to, I was a Catholic school kid for 12 years, and we used to read in church. So the first Friday of the month, all the classes would go to mass, first grade through eighth grade. And in first grade, I was asked to be the reader and read the readings, and second grade, third grade, all the way on. So I was around the microphone, even at that age, and arguably I've never put it down since. And if there's one around,
Yeah.
I'll grab it. I'll take it.
Mark, it's actually funny because, again, you're reading my mind. You're kind of going through, and I have to pull you back in a little bit, just like you jumped it earlier. But I wanted to ask you about that. You mentioned the time growing up doing readings at Catholic Church. I'm a Catholic, been going to Mass for 45 years now. I feel like that's a good way as a kid for it to get serious. Because no matter how nice your priest is, there's always, oh, that's a priest. I can't mess this up. So was there a part of you that said to yourself, look, I got to buckle down. I've got to practice. I've got to do this right, because there's just that kind of, I can't mess this up.
The preparation starts when you're a kindergartner, first grade reader at church. Leviticus and Deuteronomy don't always roll off the tongue, but and I think the preparation is something that I've certainly carried through going to a commander's training camp yesterday, just to learn the 40 new roster members before I see them against the Patriots in a couple of weeks in the preseason. You mentioned, we may have talked about. I have a fight with Golden Boy this weekend at the Mandalay Bay, and I've spent the last couple of days, putting together notes that I'm going to use on my cue cards for the weigh-in and for fight night. So that preparation definitely has carried me a long way. Actually, a priest, when I was at the University of Maryland, I was reading at the Catholic Student Center, and I think I stumbled over one of the Leviticus or Deuteronomy or Methuselah or something like that, and I repeated myself until I got it right. And he mentioned to me something interesting, because I had already been doing college games. He said, when you're in this position, sometimes you just go with the word and you just kind of keep going, because people will only notice if you stop and correct yourself. Now, there's different philosophies on that. And Jeremy, you can please, I'd appreciate it if you shared yours. I said to somebody the other day about correcting myself during a live game. I said, in sports, you only get one take, but sometimes if I feel like I sound good, I'm like, yeah, I sound really great anyway. I'll just correct myself and talk more.
Yeah, if it's a really bad bumble, I may go back and correct it, but you're right. You kind of plow through. And the other good advice I got was when I was a producer at Sirius XM, Vern Lundquist was on one of the shows and passed along something from Pat Summerall at one of the old CBS retreats, that you have more time than you think, which to me, at least in play-by-play, different than yours. You don't have to try and say, hey, Mark Fratto, not your name, obviously, but I'm just making it up. If it's a tough name and you can't find it, you just say Maryland intercepted. And then you take a little time to look down at your card and say, oh, that's what the guy's name is, right? So a little different, but some of that same philosophy of just trying to make it sound like you know what you're talking about, I feel like is always the best medicine.
Well, whatever you're doing works, brother, because you are a pro and you are smooth and polished, and I love it. And the last time I saw Vern Lundquist, I got him to say, who the hell is Happy Gilmore? That's a great accomplishment on my end, which I loved.
Mark, wanted to follow up on that. We're going to bounce all over the map here, but you
Sure.
talked about your preparation. Do you feel like when you've talked to other PA guys, obviously you've been around Michael Buffer, you've been around some of the best in the business. Do you feel like that you may be, I'm not going to say over prepared because it's your process and you do what you want, but does everybody that kind of attack it that way where maybe you're getting into a little more nitty gritty detail than others do?
Well, for 15 years, I was a sports information director. I was 6 years at Maryland and 9 years at St. John's. So, in that behind the scenes role, I used to help prepare announcers get ready for their broadcasts, whether that's preparing notes, whether that's reviewing pronunciations and certain storylines or news hooks or bullets or whatever you want to call it. So, I think I'm kind of keyed into that sort of preparation. I don't feel like I'm ready unless I've put in a certain amount of sweat equity before every show. I mean, being a public address announcer, you have to be good live. You have to say everybody's names correctly. You have to be crisp and enthusiastic if that's what it calls for. You're, our professions are related, but they're not the same. You have to prepare, so much notes, so many, you have to have so much knowledge, so many notes, and everything ready to go. And I'm sure you don't feel ready unless you've done your homework in that way as well. I mean, everybody from Michael Buffer on down prepares something. I like to, for boxing, I like to, I'll take these notes, I'll do the research online, I'll read articles, I'll read press releases, and I'll look at everybody's kind of like their box rec bios online. I'll compile some things that I think are important that people would want to know headed into that. On fight night, it's basically just fighter facts, but it might be, of course it'll be if they're a current title holder, but I might throw in, that they're, if they're going for a world title, they were a regional title holder in that weight class, from this organization or that sanctioning body or whatever, just to kind of give fans a marker for where this person has been. This professional fighter, this is not their first fight. This is their 30th fight. And during their career, they've accomplished this many wins, they've amassed this many losses, this many knockouts, and, whatever other relevant accomplishments that, kind of build the storyline and kind of build the drama for the importance of the event. I would say from the 50,000 foot perspective, and I say this to students all the time, I do take the time when I can to speak with students or speak with college kids, grad students, or even pros that are in broadcasting that want to either find, if you're real young, you might be trying to find the first step. If you're a little bit further in your career, you might be trying to find the next step. I mean, I've been fortunate to go from a high school and Division III announcer to, now a major league announcer in 3 different leagues, 3 different sports, and whatever pro boxing is my 4th one. But that's more like the circus than anything else. But from the 50,000 foot perspective, I would say the fact that I did announce in high school and then go to Division III and then spend summers at West Point and then do Maryland softball and field hockey before I ever touched basketball and football. All those things, those steps, that preparation over the past 2.5 decades has gotten me to, Mandalay Bay of Las Vegas on Friday and Saturday, or, Yankee Stadium in Manchester City and AC Milan 2 weeks ago, or, the Commanders and Patriots and in 2 weeks, and the Giants in 4. And then the Wizards season 6 starts for me. They just released the preseason schedule today. So those, there's the game prep, and then there's kind of like the life prep, the pro career prep, that I think both things are important, whether you want to kind of focus on the micro or the macro. And that's my advice that I give to, to anyone that wants to really enter this profession, yours or mine or anything related, is, the years count, the prep counts, and the game to game stuff counts.
Mark, you talked a little bit about your time. You were at West Point, you were at Maryland, you're at St. John's, and those jobs when it comes to sports information, again, I'm around those folks all the time. They are grueling, they are demanding. There's a lot of stuff that you have to take care of, but they could be fruitful if you kind of attack them in the right way. When you were kind of going through them, what were some things you were looking to do while doing those jobs as a sports information director?
Well, I'm one of those dopey guys, Jeremy, and I think you know this about me. When I get up in the morning, I bound out of bed I go downstairs, I make breakfast for the kids, I take them to school or camp, and then I'm off and running. Like I have, of course, I have trying days and frustrating days just like everybody else does. But I've been lucky for the past, 25 or so years, maybe even more, that I've really enjoyed my job and jobs. Like I've been able to kind of like approach that. And because of that, like I've been able to kind of like take on every day with a certain amount of energy and enthusiasm. And I've tried to stay consistent from the time when I was a high school announcer at like 16, 17, 18 to now, now 47. Um, and when I was the sports information director, I really loved that job. I thought it was great. I did it for 15 years as a graduate student and a full-time intern and a full-time staffer. And then when I was at St. John's as the director, senior associate athletic director. And I really, I enjoyed that job every single day. I like working with people. It's definitely a people-oriented job. When you're working in a big media market like New York or Washington, D.C., Baltimore, Washington, whatever, you're dealing with different personalities and you're dealing with a really competitive environment too. So, and I always kind of emphasize this to the people that I worked with, whether, they were young or whether I was around them when I was young, or whether when I was a little older and I was hiring younger people as part of our staff, is everything you do is for public consumption. So you get to find out how good you are every single day. There's a very loud thud when you crash and make a mistake because everything is public, everything is out there. So just the veracity that you have to approach it with, and the I would say the level of organization that you have to be disciplined enough to get to, and just to make sure that the stuff that you're putting out there is worthy of of the public, and as mistake free or typo free or factually accurate as you can. I think that drove me every single day, and in some ways, it kind of still does. I've definitely gotten sloppier as a typist in my older age, but I like to think that I had a pretty good streak going from from my sports information days, which was good. That job can be a grind, but it can also be amazing. I mean, you are on the plane, on the bus with those teams. You're experiencing the highs and lows, that the agony of defeat, and the beautiful uh, feelings that you get around a victory. You're kind of riding that roller coaster. So if you don't have a job in coaching, or and you're no longer playing, and you're not like an athletic trainer or anything like that, I mean, you are there on game days contributing to the success of your coaches and student athletes every single day. You're not scoring a goal or making a basket, but you are a part of that team. You're a part of that family. I mean, I go to weddings my former players have, former student athletes, from softball and field hockey all the way through basketball and football. I mean, you're a part of their lives. They're a part of your lives. They know my kids' names and my wife's name, Kristen Fratto and Jackson and Mason, and I know their kids. And we you have lifelong relationships, not the same as if you're uh, as with maybe your former teammates if you played a sport, but they're definitely for like that time in your life and that time in their lives. You guys become important people to each other. So it's not a bad way to go. It's not a desk job. It's an active job. Like you're out there, you're in the trenches, and I always like that.
Mark, when you were there at St. John's, I believe I was doing the research that you were maybe the one of the youngest, kind of that top level when it comes to sports information. I believe maybe you got the job at age 28, kind of very, very young. When you get that job, is there ever concern that, hey, is this too big for me? Or because you had done so much before, that step by step approach, you felt confident you could handle it?
I had imposter syndrome before anybody said the phrase imposter syndrome. And I say that to young people as well. Sometimes you're in these positions, nobody ever feels truly ready. I don't think for anything. Nobody ever feels truly ready, but you feel prepared and you trust the work and you trust the process that you've gone through. And then you have the faith in yourself, the belief in yourself to say, I'm going to get through this. I'm going to plow through this. And like I said, I don't wake up every morning thinking I'm going to have a perfect day, but I wake up every morning excited about what the day is going to bring. And that was that job. And a lot of the jobs that I've had. I was excited to go out there and uh, change processes, change the way that we did things, and really be able to make an impact in that market and on that school and for those coaches and players. I mean, that's I was able to do that. I had a big say, big stake, and the ability and the bandwidth and the latitude to really move a lot of things around. I mean, we couldn't get conventional media coverage at St. John's. We built out our digital product. We started doing um, live audio, and before that, live stats, and after that, live single camera video, and after that, live single camera video with somebody like yourself with commentary, and after that, live multi camera, and then we got to the point where we kind of took our operation, we housed it in a trailer. We had our campus facility staff move that trailer every day from basketball to volleyball, from volleyball to baseball, baseball to softball, softball to soccer, and then back to basketball. And we were broadcasting 85 games a year for ESPN Plus before it was ESPN Plus, when it was ESPN 360 and then ESPN 3. Now it's all kind of converged on ESPN Plus. So we were doing that. We were among the top 4 schools in the country at the time, talking about 2010, 2011. And Clemson, North Carolina, Florida State, and really big budget schools from big football conferences, Power 5 conferences. Those guys were doing 35, 40 games a year, and we were doing 85 or 100 games a year. We made it into a thing. And, a lot of schools have followed suit since, a lot of conferences. I mean, now it's almost, it's rarer for games not to be streamed than are being streamed. But in those days, I think we were really, we were innovators, and we were going to push the envelope, and we were going to do what we needed to do to get that done. So, yeah, just, like I said, like, even during the slow times, we kind of like tried to push the boundaries and like kind of take on new frontiers. And I think that was part of what being the only senior associate AD in the country with black hair brought to the table in those days.
Mark, and that's funny. I feel like sometimes you deal with folks where they kind of want to do the status quo, and obviously you had to have the backing of the St. John's administration. But sometimes is it just time to kind of throw the spaghetti against the wall and see what sticks?
Yeah, I think in those days the Howard Stern adage would have been appropriate for our operation. They'd be like, like, the average Fratto supporter supports Fratto like 5 days a week because they want to see what he'll do next. The average Fratto operation hater hates Fratto 7 days a week because they want to see what he'll do next. And I think that was the thing. I think we were at a part in the athletic department of the basketball program's history where there was like kind of a dip. So, and also like kind of like this big crest of social media and digital media kind of coming in. So when, even like the NFL and the SEC were trying to make sense, like, what do we do with Twitter? Like, if people can like live, like, everybody was used to waiting for something to come out in the newspaper the next day, or maybe an online article hours after practice or a game. Like, how do we kind of come up with, policies and procedures? Like, reporters can now report from practice or games in real time. And some organizations were they wanted to be conservative with that. And they were kind of, the power of this is just too much. Stuff's moving too fast. We have to slow it down. We're going to, make reporters put their phones in their pockets during practice. Okay. That was like, kind of one way to go. We said, you know what do we really have to lose? We went and found a guy who had a top 20 national or global, I guess at the time, Twitter following. He had like 11,000 followers. We had like 2,000. And we put a credential around his neck, and we were like, you, Peter Robert Casey, you are our official Twitter reporter. You're our official voice. And, we made kind of like little guidelines or whatever, but like, we had 1,100 Twitter followers. This guy had like 19,000.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell him how to do it right. Like, we learned, we learned from that. We learned from him. We learned from Shaq and John Calipari and Peter Robert Casey in those early days. And we said, all right, well, what's the worst that could happen? This is the PR quandary, right? What's the worst that can happen? What's the best that can happen? Probably what's going to happen is in the middle. But if you're okay with the worst and you hope for the best, then that's, then you find your acceptable range of outcomes. And then you're like, yeah, all right, let's put a little gas in this baby and go.
Mark, I listening back in a great interview you did on the Excelsior Journeys podcast with your old buddy George Roy from high school.
That's great. No, grade school bus.
Grade
That's like
school.
I was in first grade, he was in second grade, and it's his birthday today. Happy birthday, George Roy.
And he kind of went into all that with you, and you kind of said that basically all that work you put in at St. John's kind of led over to Linacre Media, the company you run right now, where you guys do so many things. Where was that light bulb moment for you where you said, I might be able to kind of take this on myself?
Well, Linacre Media is 10 years old, and we kind of specialize in 4 different areas. One is the live event announcing that I do, and others that work for us also do. Myself for the Washington Commanders, the Washington Wizards, New York City Football Club, MLS, and and pro boxing promotions, from big ones to small ones. We also, there's a voiceover business that's related to that. Mostly, there's a booth that we have. I'm not in it right now. I'm in the office, but down in the basement, there's a studio and a whisper booth and all that stuff. So we're set up to do voiceovers there. But I do NBA 2K. As all the other voices of the league do, and a couple other voiceover projects, mostly for teams that I work with and work for. We still hang on to a little bit of like the PR media relations from my sports info days. We used to work the NIT season tip-off every year at Barclays Center around Thanksgiving. We no longer do that, but we still work with a couple preseason tournaments, whether we're streaming or running media operations for. And then every year for the past 14-ish Final Fours. I missed a couple of years, but then 14 total. I serve the media relations function. I sit up on the dais with the coaches and players, and the media, the reporters all sit out in front of us, and we take their questions during the main news conference time. So that's there I am. That's sometimes you can see my elbow on TV. If I creep it over close enough to Coach Cal or whatever coaches are in it. Hey, there's that was former Wizard, now former Wizard Tyus Jones. That was before he was a Wizard. But I showed him that picture, I think in the preseason, the last season. I said, look at us when we were young. There we are, the Final Four. So still do that. And then the biggest part of our business in terms of scope and scale at this time is live broadcasting for television and live streaming. And that's how you and I know each other, from Georgetown football on ESPN Plus. And we do about 200 of those events a year. And the idea came from the model that we built at St. John's. And I thought, it's working so well here, and we're getting so much live coverage out there beyond what the conference deal and the network deals that conferences have are able to produce. They still own all the rights to those games, but there's not always the budget or the bandwidth to be able to produce them. And like I said, at St. John's, we went from just having our regular TV schedule produced through the Big East arrangement with, at the time, ESPN, and now it would be Fox, to, producing in excess of 100 games a year in all sports: women's basketball, baseball, soccer, women's soccer, fencing. We kind of did it all at St. John's at a time where schools weren't really doing that. And that's where kind of the idea came from, was, maybe we could take this model and kind of take it on the road to other schools, other conferences, minor league teams, etc. And that's kind of where Linacre Media was born. It's an amalgamation of all my favorite things that I used to do as a communications professional for schools, as a sports information director. I kind of kept the stuff that I really liked and kind of jettisoned the stuff that I didn't really look forward to doing year over year, like record books and 50 or 75 page game releases and stuff like that. I said, let somebody else handle that stuff. We'll just do the live stuff. We'll just do the games. So kind of like, there's still preparation. Obviously, there's still post game stuff that we have to do that we're responsible for, but it's really an emphasis on live. Everything we do is live, which, again, like I said, like there's just such I think such a great thing personally and professionally when you're live every day. You find out how good you are every single day, and that's I found so far a pretty fun way to go through life.
It seems like you always, at least when I see you, have a smile on your face, enjoying what you're doing.
Opinions vary, Jeremy, and experiences and opinions vary.
Speaking of that, you are a guy who has basically been a boss in some way, shape, or form for, I believe, at least over half of your life. What are some things that kind of you think make a good boss?
I think knowing that you're not the smartest person is probably something that I've lived by. I'm always around younger people, and younger people are like, they're more current on cultural stuff and trends and just life. Um, but they're also, tech forward, they're platform forward. They can give you an insight on how people are really consuming media, and the different ways that people are consuming media. So you can kind of meet people where they are. You can develop content, whether it's live or on demand, for different platforms. So you can deliver your message to people and give them the opportunity to choose how they want to receive it instead of just ramming it down people's throats. And that was the traditional model. And the kind of, giving people a choice, giving people an option is the current model and has been for, I'd say 15 or so years, and kind of refining that. So I think that's been one thing. Two is, another aspect is, I try to learn as much about every position as I can. I try not to put anyone in a position that I haven't done myself or are not willing to do myself. So, I think that helps me understand kind of like what they're doing and what they're going through every day. I think it also sets a good example. Um, I also we also kind of like have a rule, like whenever we enter a room or enter a space, we want to leave it better than we found it. So
Mhm.
when we leave a school or leave an arena or leave a stadium, we push our chairs in, we throw out all of our trash, we pack every single thing up, and we make sure that it's in good shape. Um, and then I think kind of like related to the kind of like my first point is just listening, just kind of like listen, listen to your customers and partners, like what do they want to get out of this, rather than like apply what I think, uh, you know, or what we think they want to get out of it. So kind of, form an opinion based on, what they want, kind of crossed with their budget, kind of
Mhm.
crossed with your ability to deliver. And maybe we can take their ideas and take what their budget is and try to make it look, sound, and feel a little bit bigger than what they originally intended. And I think the bang for your buck is what I think a lot of people feel like they're getting when they bring us in. I feel like they're, like we can give them a cost efficient um, pricing model, but we can give their productions or their live experiences, big time feel for a fraction of the cost. And I think that's kind of our mantra when it comes to that sort of thing. And then listening to the younger people that I'm around, listening to my peers and contemporaries, and kind of keep trying to stay on top of what everybody's doing, so we can be the most efficient and effective.
Mark, let's jump back over into your PA
Sure.
announcing career, where your big break came. Why? I believe you were still working with St. John's, where you were at Madison Square Garden getting ready for a big basketball tournament, and you kind of got the emergency call up, correct?
That's absolutely correct. It was, I think it was the 2K Classic, and it was the championship night. My old school Maryland was playing in that tournament, as well as Michigan State. It was Drew Neitzel. Drew Neitzel was the best player on Tom Izzo's team. Texas and Kevin Durant, the only
Mhm.
year that he played college basketball, and St. John's and our team. So my current team when I was at St. John's, and my former team Maryland. So Maryland had beaten us pretty handily the night before, and Michigan State had beaten Texas, and I think I had like gone backstage or to the locker room area, and I was coming back out to the floor, just a few minutes before the the consolation game was going to take place. So it was Texas at St. John's, my team, and Josephine Trina, who classic personality in Madison Square Garden in Big East history. She's retired and living on Staten Island now. I actually tried to give her a call the other day just to check in and make sure she's doing okay. Says to me in her unmistakable Staten Island Josephine Trina accent, and I will do this for the first time on any live or recorded podcast, just because it's yours, Jeremy. And she goes, Fratto, you're always saying that you can announce. Well, Kenny Weprin can't go. He has laryngitis. Are you going to announce this game or what? And I look at the clock and it's like 3:20, 3:19, 3:18, 3:17. No time to panic. I turned to Dustin Hawkins Smith and I said, Dusty, slide into my chair, keep the book. I told our coach, Norm Roberts, I was like, I got to announce, Dusty will take care of you. And I sat down, kind of wheeled around in the chair, and I said, welcome to Madison Square Garden, the world's most famous arena. We were off and running. And Gary Williams, who was my coach, and he and I are still close to this day at Maryland. He's always the Maryland teams under Gary Williams always got to the venue 2.5 hours ish before the game would begin. If you ask Gary, he'll tell you different reasons every time. My favorite answer that he ever gave was like it had to do with like Sun Tzu, the art of war. The first party of the battlefield had a distinct advantage, or like something like that. Mm-hmm. But he would always be in the locker room, and I would, bring our radio broadcaster, the legendary Johnny Holiday. We'd go in and do an interview. It'd be, Dick Vitale and Dan Schulman or Mike Patrick or whatever. Like we'd go, hey, we gotta go see Gary. We gotta go. So by the way, Dickie V's getting his cancer. I think he has an appointment today his cancer had come back, unfortunately, and I think they were checking to see what his latest prognosis is. So hope Dickie V's doing okay. But so we'd be doing all that stuff. But Gary would stay in the locker room until about 3 minutes before tip. So this is the St. John's versus Texas game. And we get through the first or second TV timeout, and I feel a tap on my shoulder. And I turn around and it's Coach Williams. And he goes, Mark, what are you doing? And I was like, oh, the announcer got sick. And they asked me to step in. And he goes, you're announcing at Madison Square Garden. That's unbelievable. That's great. So he is preparing for his game, or preparing for his team, in an hour and a half, or they're going to take the floor. But he and I are close. We have a really great relationship, and we always have. He kind of came out like a proud, almost like a proud dad. And it was like, this is unbelievable. Like, this is really great. So I loved it. I was addicted. I had done it, before. I'd done it at the Division I level before. I'd never announced the game at Madison Square Garden, and I'd go on to announce hundreds, which is was really, really lucky. And Kevin Durant hung 37 points on us that night on the Johnnies, 37 points for KD. And then Anthony Mason Jr., obviously Anthony Mason's son, had a shot at the buzzer that kind of hit the side of the rim, hit the top, and rimmed out, but could have upset the Longhorns then. And then Maryland would go on to roll Texas, or beat Michigan State in the championship game. So Maryland got to win, and it was some of my kids from 2 years before. It was DJ Strawberry, Travis Garrison, Nick Kaner-Medley, Chris McCray, our 2004 ACC championship team, and they were sophomores. They were now seniors. So it was great to be with them. Great to see them get a victory. If it wasn't going to be the Johnnies at the time, and literally get the tap on the shoulder, the nod from Josephine, and then the tap on the shoulder from Gary Williams. Those guys, they're two elite level Hall of Famers in actual Halls of Fame, and also in my Hall of Fame. So it was great.
Got to follow up with Gary. I was lucky enough to work at American University with Doug Dull, I believe, came after you at Maryland in that role with Gary. And
Doug was our boss. He was he took over for the great Dave Haglund, and a couple of years later, after I had gone to St. John's, Doug had moved over to American.
So Doug would always talk about working with Gary and how, Gary, one of those dudes, very quiet, but then obviously there's the Gary on game day. What was it like working with a guy who public perception was this crazy madman on the court and a pretty nice guy off of it?
Well, so Gary Williams is I owe him so much, and he has been a loyal friend and mentor to me and many, many, many others. Lonnie Baxter's going into the Hall of Fame at Maryland this fall. And that's the person, obviously he's crediting Gary for pushing him when he was a student athlete, but also pushing for him to get into the Hall of Fame, right now. I mean, he was a regional most outstanding player, I think twice, LB in 01 and 02. But Gary's unbelievable. And I had the advantage of being kind of the junior, the backup basketball SID for a couple of years before I was kind of put into the spotlight. And I was the backup during 2 Final Four runs. So that, the pressure was on. I mean, it's my first chance to work with an ACC basketball team and a high major Division I basketball team at that. for those guys, they're going to the Final Four. It's what they've worked for their whole lives and careers. I mean, me too, but I'm significantly young. I'm 23, 24, just on the road for the first time. Yeah, okay, whatever I can do to help guys. So I kind of, the tracks were laid before me about like kind of like I think the preferences or operations, and we were able to kind of like tweak that. But working for Gary Williams, he's very demanding, which some people, aren't into that, but I am, and I was. And I think the key was you had to put as much into your job as he was putting into his job. And once you figured that out, you had to care as much as him. And once he knew that you cared as much as him, you were allowed to make mistakes. Like that was okay. As long as it wasn't out of like a lack of work.
Yep.
Or like a lack of caring, or like a lack of effort. Like you didn't just quite take the time to review what you were going to put out before you were going to put out, or whatever. As long as you were making mistakes with a high level of effort and a high level of care, you were good. Everything else was forgivable. Those things were not. So, I think that was the key. And I think we're, kindred spirits kind of in that regard. And that's why I think we're, I left him a voicemail just the other day, and I expect that I'm getting a call back soon. But yeah, no, we're in touch to this day and every day since 1999. When I first arrived at Maryland in 1999, I had a college degree from SUNY Geneseo. It's a really great school. I had 3 summers of Division I experience at Army. And I was the guy doing the newspaper clips every morning. So I would get in before I had my grad classes. I'd get in, around like 8 in the morning or whatever. And by 8:40, I was bringing the athletic director and everybody else like their newspaper clippings. Remember, the internet was kind of a little baby internet at the time. So I was cutting articles out of the Baltimore Sun and the Washington Post and Washington Times and USA Today and gluing them to pieces of paper and sticking them on a copy machine and making copies and stapling them. But then I was the first person, like if you were in at like 8:30, 8:35, 8:40, I was handing you the article. So I'd go in and I'd see Coach Williams every morning, and I'd see Billy Hahn, who's a legend, and he's passed a couple of years ago. But I'd see them in the morning. They didn't at the time. They didn't know what my name was, but I hand them their articles. Morning, Coach. Have a great day. Here's And for Gary, like I knew he was interested in the Ravens, and I knew he was interested in like some other different aspects of DC sports news and other news. So in his packet, in the basketball packets, I'd always include like a couple extra things at the end that I knew he'd have interest in. But that was me every single day, at home, on the road, every single day. And I think he saw that consistency. And when the time came where my boss was leaving for the WNBA, months after we won the national championship, 6 months after, it's October, and we're getting ready for the next season as defending champs. And I got called into Doug Dull's office, and no, I don't know. I got called. I think Dave Hagman's office at the time. It was him, and it was Dave was my boss, and then Kevin was the basketball SID. So Kevin's leaving, and I said, cool. Like, we're going to do a national search, and we're going to bring in one of these other great basketball SIDs or whatever. And they said, Gary wants it to be you. Wow. He said, we don't need to do a search. Like, let's give the kid a chance. Like, we like him. We trust him. He's around. I've seen him every day for the past 6 years, or whatever it was, 3 or 4 years. So yeah, that ended up, we have a lot in common. And we did at the time, and we still do.
You talk about that work piece, Mark. That's important. Back to the Excelsior Journeys podcast. You mentioned that when you were talking to your friend George, that so many people, when they get into, they kind of follow their passion, but they don't really want to put all the work in. It's kind of, they think it's supposed to be fun all the time. But like you said, it's a dream job, but there's a lot of hard work that has to be put in, correct?
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. And I think what most people don't realize, a lot of people that get in touch with me, they'll hit me on LinkedIn or Instagram or Twitter or whatever. Hey, I want to be a broadcaster just like you. Well, some people think that I'm a broadcaster like you are, which I'm not. But I can advise on that because, I do work on the production side a lot of days out of the year. And one of the things I say is people that are broadcasters 90% of them are part-time. They're not, unless you have a network deal or like a big team deal or a multi-team deal, like you're not just being a broadcaster every day. You have to figure out something else that's going to complement what you're trying to do in broadcasting and what's going to help you keep moving forward in terms of schedule. So, somebody calls you up and they say, Jeremy, we need you to do the Washington Commanders game on USA 9. We need you to get to New Jersey right now. Chick Hernandez is sick. Chick, I hope you're not sick. Chick, I hope you're doing okay. Like you have to have a flexible enough schedule to be able to do that. But yeah, you have to have some other thing to make, you should follow your dreams, but you should have a plan. And that plan includes having some other either line of work or area of professional employment that's going to fit with your schedule and support you in terms of healthcare, in terms of, rent money, mortgage money. If you have a family, you got to be able to like stand up for them. You can't be the person that's like hanging on to that dream every single day so tight that it's the only thing that you have. And if it doesn't work out, and for most people, it doesn't work out.
Sure.
But if it doesn't work out, you have nothing else. Can't do that.
Mark, I can't believe we've gone this long without getting into your boxing, and I believe it's a pretty interesting story. Almost, I'm not going to say on a larf, but you kind of decided one day that you wanted to do boxing. Is that kind of how it all started out for you?
That's true. I was 38, which is also the year that was also the age that Michael Buffer called his first professional fight. And I decided that I wanted to do it. I got a call from Sal Federico at Madison Square Garden, who's a great friend. Actually, we were emailing just a moment ago, moments before the Huber and Friends podcast began. Sal and I were exchanging emails. And he said, what was his exact phraseology? It was kind of like the way that I remember it, and it's a long time ago now. He was like, "You're kind of a jackass. Maybe you'd like to," but he didn't say it like that. He was like, "Maybe you'd like to be the undercard announcer for this big fight that we have at the Garden. It's Gennady Golovkin against Daniel Kiel." So I was like, "Yeah, I'd love to do that." I had already, I had announced college basketball there for a number of years. I had done a couple of big events. At that time, I already done not quite had done a NFL game, but I was doing some college football and I was doing some Garden events. For basketball, I think I had maybe done one Knicks game, like big Knicks game to date, and I was doing the G League and all that stuff. So Sal calls up and he goes, "You want to do this?" So Tuesday, fight week comes, and it's Tuesday, and I don't own a tuxedo. Now I own 8 tuxedos. I don't own a tuxedo that Golovkin Gill fight week. So I'm at the Men's Warehouse on Madison Avenue in Manhattan, and I'm standing there in my underpants, and I see my phone is buzzing on the bench. And I see that it's Sal Federico. And so I pick up and he goes, "Hey," he goes, "I got bad news. The promoter from California is bringing in their own undercard announcer, so we don't need you." So I got fired from my first boxing event Tuesday, like 3 days before the weigh-in, while I was standing in my underwear. And maybe says something about me and what kind of person I am, but I was hooked at the time. I was absolutely hooked. So, that's the same jacket, 2 photos in a row, Jeremy. I don't know. We got to give you a little bit better variety. But so I ended up, he said to me, he goes, "Look, we got another fight coming in the fall. Get yourself on tape doing boxing." And I tell this story to young broadcasters all the time too. So at that point, I had done an NBA game. I had done high-level college basketball games. I'd announced 100 events at Madison Square Garden. I was already doing New York City Football Club. So I'd announced games at Yankee Stadium. And I emailed with 2 fingers. I emailed every boxing promoter that I could find on the internet, and I'm an NBA announcer and I'm going to be an NFL announcer and Division I football announcer. Hire me to be a boxing announcer. And I got 3 emails back out of 100. That's 3%. Even I can do the math. Horrible results. And they all said, like, you need to get yourself on tape. So I went to Gleason's Gym, which is the very famous boxing gym in Dumbo, Brooklyn, New York. And I talked to the owner, Bruce Silverglade, and I said, "Bruce, I have announced different levels of different sports. I've never done boxing before. Can I announce sparring? Can I announce amateurs? Can I announce anything? I need to wear a suit, have a microphone, get myself on tape, send it to Madison Square Garden. Maybe they'll hire me." So he said, "Actually, our local announcer is Sonia LaMonica. She's a heavyweight woman. She has a fight next weekend. We have 17 fights here it's Irish national team against like USA Metro. And I was like, that's great. He's like, the kids. I was like, kids? He goes, the kids are, it's like 100 pounds to like, oh, I was like, what? So I think it was like 11-year-olds through 18-year-olds. And I was the 4th of July weekend in Brooklyn. And it's the old Gleasons. I think both the old Gleasons and the new Gleasons, neither one of them have air conditioning. So I'm standing there in a suit on 4th of July weekend. And I announced 17 fights or something like that. And I got myself on tape. That got me my first pro show in August, which we did at my baseball stadium. The Brooklyn Cyclones, famous for having the Coney Island amusement park in the background with the Cyclone roller coaster and the Wonder Wheel and all that, and famous for Seinfeld Night. There I am. Seinfeld Night's this weekend in Coney Island. I hope that for my Cyclone friends that the rain stays away, because Seinfeld Night is a phenomenon. So we put the ring in the infield. I also produced the show. We did it on ESPN3. So I brought in a TV crew and I ring announced, and it was great. And then I got my first fight at Madison Square Garden when Gennady Golovkin fought David Lemieux. David Lemieux was signed to Golden Boy at the time. That got me seen by Golden Boy. And 8 years later, I get on a plane to go to Las Vegas tomorrow and announce at the Mandalay Bay, which will be my 3rd or 4th fight with Golden Boy in Vegas, and like my 7th or 8th fight in Vegas since I started doing this. So I've been all over. I've been in Mexico, obviously been in California. They're California based.
Sure.
I've announced 7 or 8 shows at Madison Square Garden. I've announced 12 shows with Michael Buffer, where I've done 7 or 8 fights, and then he comes in the end and says, let's get ready to, and then the whole place explodes, and I'm having a cocktail and sitting. I'm either sitting by myself having a cocktail, or I'm with my wife and Michael Buffer's wife. My wife's name is Kristen, and Michael Buffer's wife's name is Christine, and they've been known to hang out ringside and all that.
Mark, one theme I think that runs through all your experiences is networking, and networking can be a dirty word because people think I remember I was listening back to one of your podcasts that, it's not going and getting hammered with people that you want to be around. It's not constantly spamming them with emails. But again, I feel like you've made that you walk that fine line of being in touch with people because you want to be in touch with them. You've made friendships with folks. When you and I text, again, we've known each other for 5 years, but it's like old friends texting each other. And I know that's the way you are with other people, but on the other flip side, it also feels like it's kind of just being there and being around so that people can kind of remember that you're available. Is that kind of your philosophy on it?
I'm OCD about staying in touch and communicating. It's just something that I do. And when I'm going from like gig to gig, I have some time in the car. I'll give people phone calls, and I'll make time to take calls from students, like I mentioned before, like whoever's looking to either start a career or take their next step in their career. I'm also lucky at this point. I'm here in my office. I spend much more time at home and with my children, and I take them to school, and I take them to camp, and I take them to Commanders training camp, or I take them to Thursday night NFL rehearsals, or courtside at the Wizards, or to Disney World, and we have boxing in Florida. So, I have time to stay in touch, to network with my family, as well as with other, friends that I've met over the years, or, pros or people that, I look forward to working with someday. What I tell young people a lot is the definition of networking right now is kind of like maybe in our day when you'd apply for a job and everybody'd send their resumes in, there'd be a stack of papers on somebody's desk, and you're looking to differentiate your resume from somebody else. They used to tell us, like, hey, put it on pink paper, or spray it with perfume, or whatever, anything to stand out. Well, now when you're sending, resumes for jobs, or like if you're a broadcaster, you're sending demo reels, or MP3s or 4s or whatever, you're one of a million emails in some producer or some hiring manager's inbox. So the way that you get noticed, if Michael Jordan was the best player on the planet, but he never got the ball, nobody would ever know about it. So you may be the best aspiring broadcaster or media relations director or marketing assistant out there, but if nobody knows to look at your resume because you're one of 1,000 people applying for a job, how are you ever going to get that opportunity? And the answer is like the modern definition of networking, which is this. Over the course of my 25-year career, over the course of your multi-decade career, You've come across different people. You've worked with different people. You've made an impression on different people. So in our example, like, I know that you're good and I know what somebody else would get if they hired you. So if you were applying for a job somewhere, I would be a good person to recommend you. So either I may know somebody at the organization that you're applying for, or I might be bold enough to just make a cold call or write a note to somebody that's in that department or is the head of that department on your behalf. And for young people, I think this is super important because every job that somebody's applying for in sports, whether it's broadcasting, communications, marketing, anything external, you have to imagine you're one of 1,000 applicants,
Mhm.
and you have to do something to be able to distinguish yourself just to get noticed, just to get an interview. So the way that you do that is when you're an undergrad, when you're a high school student, when you're a grad student, whatever you can do to extend your runway, you have to intern with people, you have to work with people, you have to take entry level jobs, and you have to make an impression on someone. You're either working for low wages, or in some cases, and in my day, it would be no wages. I don't know if they
Mhm.
even kind of like do that anymore, but you have to accept little just to get your foot in the door. And then you have to make the most of the opportunity. You can't approach it as like, well, I know my worth and I'm more worth more than, of course you are. We know that. It's a given. But when you're starting and when you're dealing with even major league teams have budgets. So when you're dealing with certain budgets, you have to go there and you have to work for the job that you want, not necessarily the job or internship or staff assistantship or part-time job or game day job that you have at the time. You make an impression on somebody, they know the value you're bringing is more than they're able to pay you or reward you with. What they're going to do is they're going to internalize that feeling when it comes to you now and maybe for the rest of their career. And as it turns out, people in sports that work for sports teams play other teams literally every day. And they have a counterpart at that other team. There's multiple teams in a league. Every team has somebody that has a job that you want and has a job that your boss has. And it's somebody that your boss interacts with and knows. Maybe your boss was an intern for the Yankees and knows a whole bunch of people at the Yankees. When it comes for his entry level job at the Yankees, your boss, who doesn't work for the Yankees, maybe they work for the Trenton Thunder now, or maybe they work for Rider University now, or maybe they work for the Westchester Knicks now. They'll pick up the phone and get your resume looked at.
Yep.
If your resume gets looked at and you have the right skills and the right presentation, you get an interview, and then it's up to you. But that's what networking is right now. Networking is the thing that you've done in your past that will help get you recommended to get your resume that's one of 1,000 emails looked at, noticed, maybe get you an interview and give you an opportunity, give you a shot. That's the value of networking right now. And when I say follow your dreams, but you have to have a plan, that's part of the plan. You have to stay in touch with the people that have mentored you, that have hired you, that you've worked with, that you've kicked butt for, that you made an impression on, that you are worth taking a look at when it comes to that next position. Have to. That's a huge part of this. Again, you may be able to go for 30 a night and come up with 12 rebounds and have 9 assists, but if nobody gives you the ball or gives you any minutes, nobody's going to know.
Mark, that's such great advice. One last one for you before we wrap it up. You've been so generous with your time. What is your greatest thrill in PA, and what are some goals you've yet to accomplish?
Well, right now, and it's still new for me, this is my second year with the Washington Commanders. I had a great time last year. Our results were such that it gave us the second pick in the NFL draft. The way that that works is I don't need to explain. So I think we're going to be better this year, but I loved it last year. And when I'm in that stadium, I feel like Metallica. I feel the power of the PA, of all the my coming through all that all those speakers and into all those seats. And it takes me, it's funny, this is kind of like a cell phone, like a dad's cell phone, but like when I get home after like a 1 o'clock game, I'll get home at like 5 or 6, and I'm probably asleep on the couch at like 7 or 8 o'clock. Like it just all that adrenaline, all that stuff that has like gotten me up all day, all comes like kind of crashing out. So I become that dad who, and I love my dad, and I love my dad's dad and everybody else. But like, yeah, like, wow, man, my dad is so funny. How does he fall asleep on the couch at 8 o'clock? Well, that's me now. Sorry. I love doing big fights at Madison Square Garden. I'm really looking forward to this one at Mandalay Bay. Virgil Ortiz is it's just kind of like anything else. Like I announced him 8 years ago when he was, less than 20, like 18, 19 years old. I've announced him a couple times. I've watched his career. Now he's going for his first world title. And I'm thrilled to be there, and I'm thrilled to be a part of it. But really, like, I kind of, again, like I'm one of those kind of like, um, funny dudes that like just, hey, we're going to work at Georgetown today. Love that. Can't wait. Hey, we're going to work at Howard today. Love that. Can't wait. Hey, got a Wizards game. We're playing the Pistons. Love that. Can't wait. We're playing the Knicks. Love that. Can't wait. We're playing the Lakers. Like, oh, that's
Yep.
awesome. I can't. So I kind of love that every day. I mean, I love going to pick up my kids from camp at the end of the day. Like every single thing, it's all thrilling. And I really to kind of like mix those two things together. Like I love a day like the other day where I was able to bring the entire family out to training camp. My children cried when Sam Howell was traded to the Seattle Seahawks because he was the only quarterback that they ever knew in Washington, because they've only been paying attention for exactly 1 year. Now they're like, look at number 5 in yellow. That's Jaden Daniels. And look, 17 is Scary Terry. And my 3-year-old will be like, how many fingers is 17? But they're all, they're all excited for all that stuff. And it's just a different layer and a different perspective. And to know that my crew, my home team here is behind me, just kind of gives a different level of professional appreciation to everything we're doing. So it's all, I think it's all cool. I think it's all fun.
Is there one event though that you want to tick off the bucket list before you hang the mic up?
Oh yeah. Okay. So I have a few. I would like to announce at the Final Four. I'm excited about that. That's obviously a huge venue at this point, like with 70,000 people or something like that. I would like to do one Yankees game. I'm a New Yorker at heart still, and I'd like to be able to do one Yankees game. And someday, I would like to be an NBA All-Star. Those are my three at this point. Those are my 3 career goals.
You mean a player or announcer?
No, I would like to play shortstop. No, I'd like to play shooting guard at the NBA All-Star game. No, not a Michael Rappaport role where I'm, dribbling and chucking. I'd like to be an announcer at one of those events. I did when it was in New York, I did the G League game, and I did like a charity game when NBA All-Star was in New York last time. But I'd like to be like, invited as one of the announcers to NBA All-Star game. And I'm around All-Stars all the time. DJ Heat is an NBA All-Star. Britt Waters, the host of the Wizards, NBA All-Star. I'm just hoping I'm hoping that they rub off on me because they're outstanding. I had to work with so many great people. Janine at the Commanders is unbelievable. All the producers and directors that I get to work with, soccer, basketball, football. I mean, everybody's awesome. And a number of them are Pro Bowlers or or MLS All-Stars or NBA. So someday I'd like to join my friends and colleagues in that.
Well, Mark, you're on the right path, obviously. I'm always amazed by your capacity to seemingly do it all and have a great family as well. So, Mark Fratto, thank you so much for joining Huber and Friends. I really enjoyed it.
Love being your friend, Jeremy Huber.